Hey, Michael, I noticed in your email that you mentioned um, you were working on a little bit more rotation at impact and a little less tilt back of the spine and the way down. And so, those are the things that you see in your swing that are kind of like obvious things that stand out to you, and those are the correct things to be working on. I just want to shed a little bit more light as to potentially why you may be doing those things. Because right now, those things are actually functional. Those things are matchups in your swing that are making you functional. And so, if we look at, you know, this face-on view really quick, you can see in early transition, the lower body kind of staying closed, and very, very early, the left shoulder starts to get high and the spine tilts back. Now, the purpose that serves is that it allows the club head or that club center of mass to sort of lower down back behind you so you can come shallow and from the inside. The problem is that it kills all your rotation, it takes away speed, and it also causes you to have a little bit more flip and a higher rate of closure through the ball. So, um, the reason why you're doing these things is because of your arm structure. And what I mean by that is if we look at, here's a little bit of a comparison. So when you start away, the first thing that you do is you put pressure down into the ground into your right foot. So your knee flexes and the pressure moves out toward the ball of your right foot, and your hand path moves a little bit out this way. So if you watch this initial move, you can see it there. Okay? And what I like to see from my players is in that initial move is the trail leg, the trail knee moving back inside the right knee, the trail leg lengthening out, and imagine this point on your right hip moving back, up, and in, sort of three-dimensionally, like this right here. So there shouldn't be any movement out toward the right knee or out toward the ball of the right foot. Everything should be back, up, and in toward the right heel. And that will have an effect on the path of our hands. So your hands will start to arc more to the inside sooner, which will give you a little bit more depth. So this is the first thing that I don't like about your arm structure, is how that hand pass stays out on the toe line early. And again, I just described on how I would fix that. I'd get the pressure moving more into the heel, and I'd move this point back, up, and in and around you, and I would feel the butt of the club working back, up, and in early in the takeaway. Okay? So once we sort of solidify that move, the other moves that I don't like is, and these are tied together. So the more this hand path kind of stays out here on the toe line early, the more the golfer tends to externally rotate their trail shoulder. So what do I mean by that? That means this elbow is pointed very much kind of down right here, and the elbows are very, very close together. The problem with that is we have a very limited range of motion externally in that shoulder. It's a very tight joint. We have a lot of internal rotation ability, but we have very little external rotation. And once you kind of create that external stretch in the backswing, it starts to limit the depth to your hand path at the top. And you'll notice how this forearm bone is very, very vertical. And that's external rotation. So that's rotating that bone in this direction. Okay? And there's going to be a stretch in that shoulder. And that stretch is going to it's going to occur with sort of a rebounding effect in the course of transition. And that rebound is going to be the hand path moving out too much and the shaft starting to steepen just a little bit out of transition. So that move, if you had good body tilts and you had a good pivot, your left arm would get too far out over your toe line in the downswing, and the shaft would be too steep because this left arm would be more out here. Okay? The reason why your left arm is still in is because your left shoulder is popping up, you're sliding, you're staying closed with the lower body, and you're tilting the spine back. So it's a bit of an illusion here that you're actually shallow. And so let's go back to the backswing. what's the opposite of that external rotation where those elbows are pinching together? That's kind of like Rory over here. Watch how his trail arm starts to pull back, and you start to see the butt of the club get very deep at the top of the backswing. So I want you to note two things: how this forearm bone is on a bit more of an angle here, and how the hand path is very deep at this point, and how the shaft is a little bit more vertical, whereas you're a little bit more kind of laid off at this point. So if I could reach in there and I want you to look at the proximity of his rib cage and his elbow and how there's a distance there, okay? As that elbow moves away from that upper rib cage, that is called shoulder abduction, abduction. And what that does is it allows the butt of the club to travel a little bit deeper, nearing the top of the backswing. You're in adduction, which means your right elbow is very, very close to the chest. And that's going to limit two things: the length of your backswing and the depth to the butt of the club at the top of the backswing. This is the number one move why your club doesn't shallow as well as it should, and why you've started to create those other matchups in your swing, which is staying closed with the lower body and tilting the spine back. So if I could reach into the screen and at this point right here and kind of grab your right elbow and pull it back in this direction just a little bit, what we would see is your arm would be more in this direction and the shaft would be a little bit more vertical. And the whole butt of the club and the hand path would move over here just a little bit. So we would see arm structure that looked a little bit more like this. So there would be the left arm, there would be the right arm, and then there would be the upper humerus, and then the butt of the club would be a little bit more vertical. So just kind of imagine that was your arm structure at that point. And you would see how in transition, if you look at Rory over here, how the club just lays down from there. And you've got good depth to the hand path still coming down. The left arm is still very much in. And you've got the shaft nice and below the shoulder joint. And then once that happens, the golfer can just stay in his tilts and just keep turning and rotating and throwing it around the corner. Okay? Whereas in your case, because of that arm structure, because you got it so jammed in there externally, you have to start tilting back, stalling the rotation, and a little higher rate of closure, flipping the club face because of that staying closed and tilting through impact. So all this stuff that you're doing through impact isn't a flaw. It's an athletic, instinctual matchup that you're putting in there in an effort to make this work, okay? So what I would want you to do is structure that backswing a little bit differently. Number one, recapping. Don't move the right knee out and the pressure in the ball of the foot, and keep the hand path out on the toe line for this long in the backswing. Let's take right off the ball this point on the hip, and let's move it back, up, and in early in this direction, which is going to allow you to lengthen out this trail leg and get the hand path much deeper going back in the backswing. Now, once we're about halfway back, let's let this right elbow pull back just a little bit, and let's feel just a little bit of flying right arm at the top. That's going to let the butt of the club keep traveling in this direction, and that's going to get the center of mass in a position where the club will shallow much better. Now, you're probably going to be able to do that pretty quickly. The problem is you're going to still make the same body motions in the downswing, which means for a short period of time, you're going to come too far from the inside. You might even bottom out. You might hit some fat and thin shots until you can learn in transition to keep this left shoulder down and get the left knee around the corner and open up to clear everything out of the way. Okay? So I hope I broke this down for you in a format that was easy to understand, and you now understand sort of the cause and effect of what's going on in your golf swing.